Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interaction between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTVC. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
In any day and age, God works to spread His word and His truth. And today, there's no more effective medium of communication than rock and roll.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're the nation of tonight.
The purpose of Christian rock? To spread the word of Christianity, I would assume.
I'm standing right here in the name of Jesus. Yes.
It's an intense sounding music, and it's really a way to get your message across, you know, because you shout it out loud and clear, and you can say whatever you want to say type of thing and make the statements you want to make, and that's ideal for what Christian music is.
Let's be frank.
In 1970, there wasn't really a whole lot of contemporary Christian music for the young people to listen to. What we were doing was we would take songs like Let It Be, Bridge Over Troubled Water, I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing, those kind of songs, and we were changing the lyrics to do Christian songs. Back then, at that time, it was not called contemporary Christian music. We were called Jesus music, and Jesus people, and Jesus freaks. And this is the time period we call as the Jesus movement.
What you have been hearing and seeing is part of the history of how contemporary Christian music has evolved in the last 10 or 15 years, and the subject of today's show on Austin Faith Dialogue. Hello, I'm Barbara Holmes on the staff of St. John's United Methodist Church, and your host for today's program. This weekly religious public affairs program is brought to you by Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We're going to have two shows where we talk about contemporary Christian music. In every age, a different or a new musical style has evolved in the religious community and has been called contemporary at that time. Oratorios, gospel, folk masses, rock music. Today, there's a variety of new expressions of basic Christian themes that are heard in churches, on records, even at festivals. We have some guests to talk to us today who have been a part of contemporary Christian music and may have thought about some of the future of it, and I'd like to introduce to you Maury Milliken. Maury's pastor at Mission Hills Church here in Austin. Dick Pickens, who's been involved in the radio industry for a long, long time. And Philip Sandifer, not only a musician, but he produces records and is the owner of a company that specializes in contemporary Christian music. So, welcome to each of you. And as that tape, that documentary was playing, I thought, you all have been visiting and getting reacquainted, thinking back to, you were saying that was done during the late 60s, that was done during the mid-70s. Maury, where were you when some of that Jesus freak, Jesus movement stuff was taking place? Were you a part of that then?
Well, actually I was just a little guy.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, what influence did that have on you?
Well, I grew up in a church that was open to receiving people who were not known to be traditionally religious folks. And as a result of that openness, I happened to be thrust into the mainstream of the Jesus movement in the 60s and 70s.
That's when the real start was, the 60s and 70s?
I would say so. Maybe our
especially the early 70s.
Expert here can tell us.
Early 70s?
Well, he says expert because I'm the oldest one here. But yes, the real thrust of the Jesus movement happened in the aftermath of that era of lostness in the 60s, where everybody was searching for peace and searching for something real. And it was in the early 70s that I stumbled into it, actually, in starting a coffee house near the University of Texas.
So you were the beginning of it.
Here in
You started it all off, right?
It was going when I got into it, I'd have to say that. But It was quite a phenomenon, and it is closely associated to this music that we're talking about.
Well, now, Philip, were you also as young as Mari? You were probably about a contemporary hymn. See, at some point, this probably had a profound effect on both of your lives because of your profession. So, where were you when this was happening?
I'm like Maury. I was kind of a little guy too, but I was not aware of quote Christian music at all until late '70s, early '80s, and I was already in college and kind of stumbled across it just by virtue of some friends of mine giving me some albums by, of course, everybody's heard of Amy Grant, and it was an Amy Grant record, and all of a sudden, you know, I realized that people actually wrote about things that they felt like were important in terms of their belief in Christ. And that sort of thing.
Songwriters.
Yeah, I've always been more attracted to, I never was caught up in the Hate Jesus movement, but what affected me was the fact that because I was already a songwriter at the time, it was amazing for me to stumble across someone who was writing about things that they deeply believed in. And
But the subject of your songwriting at that time was not your Christian commitment.
Well, actually, it was a little bit, and not as much as it, you know, not as focused as it is now in terms of my faith in Christ. But it was because I typically have always written about what I'm going through, whether it be, you know, lessons in life, whatever the case may be. And around this time, I was beginning to grow and discover more about what it meant to be a Christian, and a lot of my writings actually did reflect that. And that's why it was so exciting for me to come across other music that was in that vein. But I was not aware that there was a big thing called Christian music. I mean, it was just, I got some records that were Christian music.
But that really matched up nicely because it fitted so well with the direction that you were headed, sounds like to me.
Right,
And as I think about that, Maury, you grew up around that kind of music. Obviously, you all were very young guys. Did that kind of music have an influence on your decision to go into ordained ministry and make that commitment for life?
Well, let me clarify something. Though I was in a church when I was a kid that was part of the Jesus movement, I left the church when I was about 13 in pursuit of Led Zeppelin and Yes and Rush and more secular rock bands, you know, that were popular
But
at
the
the time.
music was very attractive
yes,
to you.
the music communicated passion and power and sort of a enthusiasm for life and, well, some other things as well, but that's what attracted me, you know, as a kid, you know, as a teenager. And so I, in a sense, pulled away from Christian music and was much more interested in the music of the day. And then I started getting into pop music on the radio and stuff. But it wasn't until I was 17, 4 years later, that I heard about contemporary Christian music. Even though I was in the Jesus movement when I was a kid, it was still kind of folk-type music, and even still, you know, the gospel quartets were still really the big thing, even then. And I had never heard of contemporary Christian music until I got a hold of some albums when I was about 17.
So in a little bit of the same way, the thing that happened to Philip, there was a whole thing there waiting for you that you had not known about.
I had no idea that it was out there.
Now, he
Even that,
writes, but you are a performer, are you not also?
Yes, I've performed in several rock and roll bands in my life.
Well, how did that and ministry come together?
Well, when I became a Christian, by that I mean when I fully embraced all that I was raised in and all that I was taught when I was a kid and really believed it and came to know the Lord personally, I realized that He was calling me to surrender every part of my life and not just, you know, the religious part of it. And the biggest part to me was music. I mean, I lived for that. Like in high school, we used to say, we live, eat, breathe, sleep music, you know? And so for me, it was a big step to take my music and to begin to use it to communicate something that was much more valuable to me now that I had come to believe it and embrace it with all of my heart.
And that led you into steps. You have been in seminary and serving a congregation. You're associate pastor at Mission Hills, and now you're a seminary graduate and still serving there. Well, now, Dick, I'd like to look to you to kind of put together, you've heard, somebody walked up and gave these guys an album, which kind of was a light bulb experience in that they saw there was a whole field, quote, contemporary music. Both of them used that phrase. Where did that come from? Did that come out of the Peter, Paul, and Mary's? Did that come out of, how did that come about?
Well, first of all, let me say that I was one of the guys who was corrupting them in their music before that, because I was a disc jockey, a rock and roll top 40 disc jockey for about 25 years, including several stations here in Austin. So I stumbled into the Christian music scene partly through my own deepening faith, which began to happen in the mid-60s, and I got involved in prayer groups and Bible studies, and a little before the mid-60s I ended up going to seminary, entered the same seminary that Mari recently graduated from, the Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and evolved out of radio and into ministry sort of gradually, although they keep overlapping, and they still do. So that by the time I got out of seminary, I got into a coffee house ministry. It was a work of evangelism in my way of thinking. And
but music was very central to it.
music was very central to it, but I didn't have any particular music expertise. In fact, I often joke that the only expertise I had in the coffee house was that I was a good light and sound man. And so I could run the lights and the sound, and the musicians just seemed to come out of the woodwork everywhere
Well, now,
we
where
turned
was
around.
this?
This was in,
On
this
the
was,
campus?
This
Near
was
the
off campus, one block, right behind the Jack in the Box, off the drag there.
And
on the
about
drag.
what time frame?
And this was the early 70s, up to 75.
Okay.
And what happened was this world was out there, all of these young kids, these musicians, these older kids too, who played guitar, who were writing songs that were very inspired music, traveling groups, all of this, and we would simply throw open the coffee house on Friday nights and Saturday nights, and musicians would show up from everywhere. It was incredible. I didn't know all of that music was out there. Some of it before that, I must say, also started in little folk-type groups. Groups that met in Bible studies, and they wrote the things, the worship songs that you sang in the prayer groups and the prayer meetings. And it hadn't gotten in the churches very much at that point. It was very strange to hear it in the church. You'd hear it in the para-church groups or in the underground church type groups or whatever. And it was only later in the 70s, mid-70s, that you began to hear this music happening in church. Now you go everywhere. You go to a Catholic church, you go to a Methodist church, they're all singing the little gospel songs. You don't hear the rock quite as much in all of the churches, but then that's because the rock music that we've alluded to here is aimed at a generation who especially needs to hear and be approached by that music.
Style.
That style.
Well, now, Philip, as he said, performers, musicians, guitar players began coming out of the woodwork. When you were writing songs, who was the audience for that? Were you identified with a church? Would you tell us a little about your religious background?
When I first started writing and performing Christian music, I wasn't really affiliated with a church at all. I mainly did kind of coffee houses like what Dick is talking about, and played for parachurch organizations around college campuses in different parts of the country and that sort of thing. But as far as my background and my upbringing, I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and until I was 14, and then my needs really weren't met as much. Nothing against the Episcopal Church, but my needs were not being met, I felt like, by the Episcopal Church, and I attended another church, and those are my roots, basically. My father is an Episcopal priest, in fact, up in Baltimore, Maryland, and so my upbringing really didn't have a whole lot to do with my entering into music really that much, though. It was just more of what I did.
That you were just going to express your feelings through writing music and then performing too. When you said you performed with para-church groups and around the country, was that as a vocalist, a group, or did it have a wonderful name?
Well, both. I mean, we travel sometimes with the band, and I do a lot of traveling also solo. And we'll go into, like a Campus Crusade for Christ group will bring me in. They'll put a concert together on a college campus, or the Baptist Student Union or the Wesley Foundation, whatever the case may be. They'll bring me in, or sometimes it's just an individual concert promoter will bring me in. We'll have a concert in the union and that sort of thing. One of my very favorite atmospheres is like something similar to what's the at UT the club in the downstairs of the Union. I don't know what it's called now. I think it used to be. I can't remember what it used to be called, but the tavern. Yeah, I mean that thank you. That kind of environment is my absolutely very favorite environment, because, and it's not necessarily singing with Christians. I mean, to me, music is. This is what I happen to believe in, and when I sing and talk to people in my concert, I give them credit for being intelligent human beings, and I appreciate the fact that they're willing to sit and listen to what I have to say and sing about.
So you're always taking the Christian message in your songs and your music.
Yeah, but not every single song may be about the Lord. I mean, it might just be a nice song.
As a matter of fact, he writes a lot of good love songs. They're just good love songs. The first time that I heard Philip Sandifer sing was at a high school graduation dinner at one of the local churches here. And he sang a song that probably would have been rejected by a lot of church groups. They wouldn't have understood it. It was a song, Let Her Dance.
Always Let Her Dance.
Always Let Her Dance. And this has become Nancy's and my favorite song ever since we heard him sing it that night. I had tears in my eyes when he finished it. It's not a Christian song just from the lyrics, but the message behind it is profound.
Well, and that song in particular was really, really misunderstood by Christian radio when it was released. The record company that I was recording for at the time that this went on, they sent it out, and most Christian radio, because the gist of the song is talking about in a relationship as man and wife, giving each other the freedom to pursue individually your walks with God. And it's not getting into the male's the head of the household issue and all that kind of stuff. It's just talking about giving each other the freedom to pursue that relationship, knowing that God will draw you together as He's drawing you closer to Himself. But a lot of people misinterpret it, and just, Christian radio, it's one of those songs where you if you don't oftentimes have the opportunity to set it up, talking, that some people will really misunderstand, especially.
Well, I think all of us hear a lot of times what we want to hear, so I can understand how that would be open to misinterpretation.
Now let me tell you, the next time I heard him sing in person was at Westlake Hills Presbyterian Church, where he did a rock concert. And by the way, we had some 50, 60-year-old people in there who were enjoying every minute of it.
Well, now, Maury, at Mission Hills, certainly contemporary Christian music is very much a part of its life. Is rock music a part of your congregational life, as long as Dick has brought that up?
Well, you'll occasionally hear special music done with a rock and roll format, but most of the music is mainstream, kind of folk, pop.
Yeah,
but it's not all rock and roll or heavy metal. We'll occasionally have something in that genre, but we mix it up. We try to mix it up, but it's mostly contemporary in the pop, mainstream, rock, light rock category.
Light rock. I think for some of this is a whole new vocabulary that we're learning.
It is hard to define.
But you're saying that the hard rock is not something that your congregation responds to as well as other kinds of music. But tell us a little more about your congregation. Is it a relatively new church?
Mission Hills Church is 4 years old. We were a church that was sent out by another church, Hope Chapel in North Austin, for the specific purpose of trying to reach younger people. And so we chose an area in town, the Riverside area, just 2 blocks east of Riverside, where all those apartments and clubs and places are for nightlife, to start a church. And part of the part of our appeal to that community was our music. We wanted to select a musical style that would reach the people that were in the community.
And do you feel that that is effective, that through the music you are able to reach them in a way probably other congregations or you all would not be able to?
Well, it helps people. Today, for young people going setting foot inside a church door can be a culture shock. It can be a totally different culture for like a UT student going to a church. You know, it's like going to the art museum or going to someplace that you don't usually go to.
So you're really challenged to even attract them, to get them to come in the door.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, church is medieval, you know, and it's just, you know, what does church really have to say to me, a UT college student type person, you know? So we try to make people comfortable when they come into the church. And one way that we do that is we give them a music that they can identify with.
So then the congregation has been there about 4 years, and do you feel you are there students, is that how you would describe the membership, is probably 70, 90%
yeah,
students?
The majority are young singles, but we do have some young families with children, and we will probably be growing more into a family church as time marches on. But for now, our focus is upon singles, young singles, and upon young families.
Well, as you talk about that particular way to reach out to those who would not come into, I think the language this day and age is mainline churches, or old line even, instead of
or traditional.
Traditional churches. You were saying a while ago that sometimes the contemporary music is being played in some churches, but let me ask you, Philip, are you finding that that there is an openness to alternate styles of music, including contemporary, maybe even rock, in the broader Christian community?
As far as the more traditional churches and that sort of thing?
Yes, I would say the more traditional old line, main line, however you describe those.
Yeah, I've really seen it happen in the last few years. Being from, as we talked about earlier, from the Episcopal Church, and I know back when I was growing up in the Episcopal Church, it was a real high church atmosphere, and you know, mainly if there was anything that was a little bit more contemporary, it was the folk mass that was happening back in that time, but not a whole lot to do with what is really considered now contemporary Christian music. You know, the more contemporary stuff. And now it may not be necessarily part of the worship service, but there may be like an evening service where they'll put on a concert, or as part of the youth group at least, you know, get involved in Christian music, where it didn't really used to be that way at all. I mean, growing up, being a, you know, an acolyte, just a young kid, it was real, you know, here's church music and here's popular music, you know.
So you're feeling that, let's use the word, the organized church is moving slowly to more flexibility about its musical expression.
Yeah, well, you know, across the street here at St. David's Church, there's a bookstore that's in the church now that sells contemporary Christian music, you know, which is kind of neat.
Well, and I remember they were one of the first ones to have a folk mass also. It had a very popular service. Many of those churches offer an alternate style of service, so you don't have to give up the more traditional style. Dick, I did want to look to you for a little bit to talk about Christian radio as here in Austin. There's several stations that play Christian music in a way that has not been for, well, it's becoming more and more popular. Comment just a little bit on the growing appeal of Christian contemporary music.
Well, first of all, the thing that is very important is, and Philip could back this up, that contemporary Christian music has become very professional, and I mean that in a good way. When you listen to the music that I play on my show on Sunday mornings on 94.7 FM, that music will stand up in quality to anything else that is played on that station, which is a good, easy listening station. We play a little upbeat, middle of the road there.
No matter what Ed Ward says.
But
now y'all are getting off the commercial here. Let's get back to the question.
But it is quality recording. It is first class. The arrangements are outstanding. The synthesizer work is just absolutely professional, and of course the voices are too. And so when you look at it that way, it meets a standard that the public is used to hearing these days. You have to have quality. It's not the hokey type of music that we sometimes associate with Christian music. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is what's the spirit behind the music? Rock music is one of those places you have to really apply that test, because you can have one Christian group come in and do rock music and it ministers to your soul. You have another rock group that may come along and do, and it's a concert only. It's not,
Kind of bland.
something's wrong with
Performing
it's
music is
performing
what's-
music. Something's wrong with the spirit of it. It doesn't communicate the right way. But in terms of the stations, you have now 3 Christian radio stations in Austin. You also have some several, at least 2 I know of, secular stations that are playing Christian music on Sundays. And that is a trend that I think we will see more and more of, because that listening audience is growing out there, especially the listening audience for this type of music.
Well, that is a wonderful place to leave for this week, because the next time we have this show, we're going to talk about the industry. Does it lose something in the translation from going from Christian music to commercial? And just look some more at that. And I can't express enough appreciation to each of you for being here, for your discussions, for helping us know a little about how all of this came about. Our guests today have brought us a much better understanding and insight about this new expression of Christian music, and we hope you'll join us 2 weeks from now when the dialogue will continue, and we'll look at the role and the impact of contemporary Christian music here in Austin this week. So good day for Austin Faith Dialogue.